The Department of Transportation, under the strong leadership of Secretary Arthur P. Tugade, has been ushering in the golden age of Philippine railway network, with record-breaking investments being made in record scale and in record time. From 9 railway contracts under management in July 2016, the DOTR has awarded and is now implementing 36 railway contracts, with 12 more contracts to be awarded within 2021, each with an average contract amount of 20 billion pesos. These contracts add up to 1 completed project, 7 projects ongoing construction, 1 ongoing rehabilitation, and 5 projects ongoing design and procurement. Among these game-changing projects is the North-South Commuter Railway of the DOTR and PNR, which despite being started in 1994 as the Manila-Clark North Rail Project, only started construction in January 2019. The nscr consists of a 147-kilometer railway system with 35 stations and 464 train cars, spanning 27 cities and municipalities, 3 provinces, and 3 regions, from Clark International Airport in Luzon through the National Capital Region and all the way to Laguna in Calabarzon. Aside from being the Philippines' single largest railway project, the nscr also holds the distinction of being the single largest infrastructure project of the Asian Development Bank and the longest commuter railway project of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Once fully operational, the nscr will cut down travel time between Clark and Calamba from more than 4 hours down to less than 2 hours. Travel time from the Clark International Airport to Makati City via the country's first airport express service will be under an hour. This massive railway system is expected to accommodate more than 800,000 passengers per day in its first year of full operations, with capacity to service more than 1 million passengers per day in the decades to come. In the process, the nscr will generate 25,000 direct jobs during construction and close to 10,000 jobs during its eventual operations. Construction is in full swing for the nscr Manila to Clark segment's 88 kilometers of viaducts, 17 stations, and 2 depots, with all 7 civil works contractors from Japan, South Korea, Spain, and Thailand partnering with Philippine contractors already in different stages of construction. Despite the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global railway construction industry, the DOTR and PNR under the Duterte administration's Build, Build, Build program have been steadfast in making this almost 2-decade dream of a more comfortable life for every Filipino a reality.
When the Duterte administration started in July 2016 and Secretary Arthur Tugade took the helm of DOTR, it was greeted by a then-stalled Manila-Clark or North Rail project, which despite having been conceptualized in 1994, was then very far behind from its vision of seamlessly connecting the growing industrial, commercial, and aviation hub that is Clark and the bustling capital of Metro Manila. 27 years since North Rail was dreamt of in 1994, and just 5 years since Secretary Tugade became the 12th Transportation Secretary who tried to realize and implement the North Rail project. Now, today, we finally stand on very clear, very concrete, and indisputable proof that this project is happening. Long awaited, long talked about, but very much needed, the North-South Commuter Railway project is finally becoming a reality. Massive is a word that is often and very appropriately used to describe the North-South Commuter Railway project. So indeed, the nscr system is massive and it is going to be a reality, as you can see, with all of the construction progress that we have done, despite the global pandemic and despite all of the construction-related constraints that we had to face. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we continued working. We pushed hard under the strong leadership of Secretary Tugade, and there is no stopping this train. We are full steam ahead to deliver President Duterte's promise of a more comfortable life to every Filipino under the Build, Build, Build program.